It's a beautiful 67 degrees here in central Illinois. You know, it was a clear day, sadly, in November when President Kennedy was shot. And that is one of the things that is a bearing into a lot of the looking back upon that terrible event. And Vincent Bugliosi, who is, of course, a very well-known prosecutor, prosecuted the Manson case and has looked at a number of cases, had an incredible record as a prosecutor, has decided to take up this issue of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in his new book, Reclaiming History, and he's joining us right now. Mr. Bugliosi, thanks for being on the show.
I'm happy to be on the show, Steve.
What made you decide to approach this particular incident?
Well, in 1986, London Weekend Television asked me to, quote, prosecute Lee Harvey Oswald in London in a I don't want to call it a mock trial because there's mock trials going on every day around the country. We had the real Warren Commission witnesses, and Jerry Spence, you've heard of him.
Right.
He defended Oswald.
He has nice jackets, by the way.
Yeah, right. And we had a regular federal judge, a regular federal jury, no script, because I said if there's going to be a script involved, I'm not interested. And they said, no, the script's going to be your yellow pad. Spence and I worked on it for close to a year. We treated it like a real murder case, and we were on film over in London for 21 hours. The jury came back with a verdict of guilty, and Time magazine said it was the best courtroom drama ever, and more importantly, it said it's the closest to a real trial that the accused assassin of President Kennedy will likely ever have. So my exposure to that case, dealing with the actual witnesses and doing research, it became very obvious to me that all of these conspiracy theories were just pure moonshine, and I decided to write a book on it. Of course, I had written Helter Skelter before that, and some other books, but I decided to take on the most important murder case in American history, and it took me 20 years to do so. The book that you have there is over 1,600 pages.
It sure is.
And then there's a CD with another 1,125 pages. The reason why the book is so long, Steve, is twofold. Number one, it's the first book on the assassination to cover the entire case. No other book has even attempted to cover the entire case because it's just too broad, but maybe like a fool, whatever it is, I took on the entire case, and I cover ground here that's not even covered in the Warren Report or the House Select Committee on Assassinations. The second reason the book is so long is that there are two separate realities here. One reality, Steve, is that within hours of the shooting in Dealey Plaza, virtually everyone in Dallas law enforcement, I'm referring to the Dallas PD, the Sheriff's Office, local offices of the FBI, it was obvious to them that Oswald had killed Kennedy, and when they learned what a complete kook he was, that he most likely acted alone, no one's going to conspire with a nut like that. That is one reality. It's a very, very simple case, and it remains a simple case to this very day at its core. But there's another reality here, and here's what the other reality is. Because of the unceasing and fanatical obsession of literally, and I'm not exaggerating here, literally thousands upon thousands of Warren Commission critics and conspiracy theorists from around the world, mostly in the United States, who've investigated every single aspect of this case for close to 44 years and made hundreds upon hundreds of allegations. This simple case has been transformed into its present state, and its present state is that it's the most complex murder case by far in world history. Nothing even remotely comes close to it. Just to give you an example, in manuscript form, one of my endnotes, I'm not talking about the main text now, just an endnote on acoustics is 120 pages with about 60 footnotes. So the case is simple at its core, but it's been transformed into an extremely complex case, and it required this type of effort on my part to put out what I feel and other people feel is the definitive book on the Kennedy assassination.
Well, yeah, and there are hundreds of different theories, but the ones that stick out for me when you hear about this stuff, and, you know, it is filtered a great deal through popular culture, through the movie, of course, the Oliver Stone film, which, of course, is not, it's not a documentary.
No.
But there are certain things that were presented in that movie, and you see a lot of the critics say that I'm just going to run some of them down, and you wonder things like, okay, magic bullet. How did that bullet do what they said it would do?
Well, what they do, the conspiracy theorists, and this is just illustrative of the lies that they've engaged in throughout the years, in their sketches, they put Connally seated in the presidential limousine directly in front of Kennedy, and they say a bullet traveling from the president's right rear, passing through soft tissue, exiting the president's throat. They say to hit Connally, it would have had to make a right turn in midair and then a left turn to go on to hit Connally. Therefore, it's a magic bullet. Bullets don't even do that in cartoons, and everyone starts to laugh. Well, if you start out with an erroneous premise, everything that follows makes a heck of a lot of sense. The only problem is that it's wrong. And Connally was not seated directly in front of Kennedy in the limousine. The Zapruder film and hundreds of photographs, and I have one very good photograph in the book, show that Connally was seated to the president's left front. He was sitting on a jump seat a half a foot in from the door. So he was to his left front. So therefore, a bullet passing on a straight line through Kennedy had to go on and hit Connally for the simple reason that there's nowhere else for it to go except to hit Governor Connally. Now, at the trial in London, Spence called Dr. Cyril Weck to the stand, and Weck testified to the magic bullet. On cross-examination, I said, Doctor, if this bullet did not hit Connally, as you claim it did not do, I said, how come it didn't tear up the interior of the limousine or hit the driver? He says, I don't know. I didn't conduct the investigation in this case. I said, well, let's look at this a little more here now, because maybe you've got a magic bullet, I said. If it didn't hit Connally, and it didn't hit the interior of the limousine, and didn't hit the driver, I said it must have zigzagged to the left. And he said, no, it did not have to zigzag to the left. It did not zigzag to the left. I said, did it hop, skip, and jump over the car? He said it didn't have to perform any remarkable feat like that. I said, well then, Doctor, what happened to this bullet? He says, I don't know. So what we really have here, Steve, is that the magic bullet, that whole concept, has been wrapped around the neck of the Warren Commission for close to 44 years, and it turns out that the Warren Commission doesn't have any magic bullet at all. The conspiracy theorists have a magic bullet, because if we're to believe them, after the bullet exits Kennedy's throat, it apparently vanished without a trace into thin air. What happened to that bullet if it didn't hit Connally? So there is no magic bullet. It's just pure silliness. And they know that Connally was seated to the left front, and yet in Oliver Stone's movie and in all the conspiracy books, they put Connally in a sketch seated directly in front of Kennedy. That's not true.
So, first off, Mr. Bugliosi, if I'm ever in any sort of trouble,
yes,
I'm going to try to get a hold of you.
Oh, thank you, sir.
You're a very good lawyer.
Thank you, sir.
It seems perfectly plausible when you put it that way. The only thing I would say is, would it have been possible for it to completely go through and deflect out into, like, the grassy knoll or something, and they just never found it?
Well, no one has questioned, even Dr. Weck, who is the main doctor for the conspiracy theorists, he doesn't question that the bullet passed through soft tissue in Kennedy. He just doesn't know what happened to it after it exited the front of the president's throat. So no one claims that bullet ended up on the grassy knoll, although there are people that claim that shots came from the grassy knoll, which we can get into if
yeah,
you want to do that.
Yeah, it could be echoes or something like that. Okay, well, while we're in that whole idea of the Zapruder film, what it shows, what it doesn't show, there's that argument that says about the president that after the impact, you can see that President Kennedy goes back. His head snaps backward, which might be contradictory from how you'd think the impact would affect it if the shot were coming from where Oswald was.
Right. Now, this is an area where the conspiracy theorists, one of the few areas where they're not lying, it's just a case of they're not really understanding what's involved here. That was first shown on a Geraldo Rivera special. He had a show, I think, Good Night America or something, in 1975 on ABC, and millions of people saw that for the first time, and understandably saw the head snap to the rear, and therefore they said the shot must have come from the front where the grassy knoll is, not from the right rear where Oswald was in the book depository building. My answer to that, and Spence at the trial in London showed that segment 5 times and said, Mr. Bugliosi is trying to convince you folks that what you saw with your own eyes, as you can see, that you really are not seeing what we know you saw. With his fancy medical doctors and all of his theories and everything like that, it looked like Babe Ruth struck the president from the front. He said you can see the shot, the head snap to the rear. Obviously, the shot came from the front. And if I hadn't been able to answer that, the verdict in London would have been not guilty, because he would have raised a reasonable doubt of guilt. But here's the answer to that. If you look at the individual frames of the Zapruder film, you cannot see it if you look at the film. You have to look at the individual frames, which I showed the jury on a screen. If you look at frame 312, the president's head is okay. At frame 313, which is 1/18th of a second later, the president is struck in the head, and you can see the explosion to his head. In what direction is the head pushed at frame 313? Not backwards,
but forward,
slightly forward, indicating what? A shot from the rear. So at the all-important, Steve, all-important moment of impact, that's more important than what you see on the film. At the all-important moment of impact, the moment that bullet hit the president's head, his head was pushed forward, indicating a shot from the rear, and then at frames 314 to 321, you have the head snap to the rear caused by the neuromuscular reaction.
Okay, you got me there.
Okay.
You're winning me over there. And here's the one thing. Whenever I saw anything about this, the one thing that always put the biggest amount of doubt in my mind, if I were sitting in that jury box, is the carbine rifle and the 3 shots and how quickly you can fire, eject the cartridge, aim, fire, eject the cartridge, and fire again.
Okay, they're confused about the time that he had. The first shot was fired at around frame 160, and there's 18.3 frames per second. The final shot at 313, that's 8.4 seconds later, not 5.6 seconds as the conspiracy theorists say. 8.4 seconds. Now, could this be done? The conspiracy theorists said no one has ever duplicated what Oswald did. That's another lie. At the time of the Warren Commission, a specialist Miller for the Army duplicated what Oswald did in 1967. CBS had some people duplicate, in fact, beat what Oswald did. At the trial in London, my firearms guy from Wisconsin beat what Oswald did. What he did was not that great. I'm not saying he was a poor shot, but the first shot missed completely. The second shot, we assume he's aiming at the head. That's the most vulnerable part of the body. Didn't hit the head. Hit the upper right back, exited the front of the throat. And the third shot hits him in the head at frame 313. So 1 out of 3 shots actually hit the president. Now, you were indicating before we went on the air that you'd been down to Dealey Plaza.
Yeah, and they've got the museum up there on the 6th floor, and they've got the actual shooter's window blocked off.
Yeah, but
there's
when I was
another
up
window.
there, it wasn't blocked off. When I was up there in '86, but it's blocked off now, right?
And they've got, in a very macabre sense, it's weird. They've got a big X at the point of impact on the road.
Right.
And I just remember looking out of there, going, I see how somebody could shoot somebody from that distance fairly easily.
The first shot that hit the president was about 59 yards. The second shot that hit the president, the head shot, was about 88 yards. That's not that far away. On the range, when you fire for record, it's 100, 200, 300, and 500 yards. The limousine was going very slowly, about 11 miles per hour. And if you go to the window, I was there before they put that plexiglass around it. But if you go to the window and imagine holding the barrel, holding a rifle, the barrel of the rifle is almost on a straight line with Elm Street. And Elm Street has a 3.9 declination, and the relevance of that is that it eliminates the necessity of elevating the muzzle as the limousine gets farther away from the window. And my firearms guy in London on the stand, I said, I don't want to put words in your mouth. And I said, but was the president essentially a stationary target? And he says, yes, he essentially was a stationary target. It was not that difficult a shot. It was pretty close, and as I say, it was on a straight line. Actually, the grassy knoll would have been a much more difficult shot because from the grassy knoll, the president is moving from left to right, whereas at the window there, it's almost on a straight line.
Yeah, but I mean, come on, all those professional super black spies from the CIA that made that shot were really good.
Yeah, they were so good that even the House Select Committee said the shot that came from the grassy knoll, and it's been totally discredited, so good a shot that not only couldn't the guy at the grassy knoll hit Connolly or Kennedy, he couldn't even hit the presidential limousine. That shot that allegedly came from the grassy knoll, no shot hit the limousine at all.
Vincent Bugliosi, I got to tell you, you're very convincing.
Well, I appreciate that. And I hope my book is likewise convincing. The Los Angeles Times, just Sunday, says Bugliosi has definitively explained the murder that recalibrated modern America. It is a book for the ages. I really feel it is. It's difficult for me to talk about this case candidly without sounding like I'm boasting, but I think it is a book for the ages. I think it is the book on the case.
Well, and what's interesting about it, as you mentioned, is you do break it down. We got into just like 3 little tiny points. But the reason I think that your book is, well, frankly, it's about the size of my car, is because you go into all of these different things. And I appreciate you taking some time with us today to talk about it.
Thanks so much, Steve. It was a pleasure being on the show.
Vincent Bugliosi joining us on The Voice, 1230 WJBC. We'll be right back after this.